I want them to be so excited at the end of that call, right? Because we've gotten them to go like, oh, that's exactly what we need so many times that when you do that with a buyer, you don't even need to map out next steps. You don't need to ask what comes next, right?
Sam McKenna. So we're going to start with the fun question right off the rip. So you've been in thousands, hundreds of thousands of meetings. And then from a buyer perspective, though, what is something that someone has done to stand out as a seller within the first few seconds that you've always remembered?
Oh, man. So I think it's so far and few between, right? But people who practice what we call show me, you know me. So if you can kind of squint behind me on the wall and see one of two frames, it's the art of actually giving a darn, or as our dear friend Jen Allen says, and then it's an S word there, about people and doing your research before you reach out. So how do we do that, right? Like for us, it's you go to your LinkedIn profile first and foremost for any buyer and see what information is listed there. Where did they go to school? Who do they know? Where did they work before? What's in their about section? Do they post content? Were they on a podcast recently? What can we find out about them, right, as human beings to connect with? And if we can't find anything on that, what do we find out about their company? What's going on with their stock? What's going on with their initiatives? Do they invest in, initiatives for philanthropy? What can we find out about them? And then we take that information, which sounds a little creepy, by the way, but we take that information and we create a subject line that makes absolutely no sense except to the person reading it. So let me give you an example. Not what's worked on me, but what's worked for me. I reached out to the CRO of a very little known company in tech sales called SalesLoft. And I imagine that there are, 100 people who are trying to get on the CRS calendar today, tomorrow. And instead, I went on his profile. I looked at some of his content. I saw that he went back and forth with Toby Carrington, who is the C-suite over at Seismic, for you guys who don't know him. And it talked about how, people are using fake authenticity to get people's attention, and how Toby said, people say, hey, I see you're Australian. Want to buy my stuff? So I created a subject line that said, quote unquote, Toby is Australian, plus, and then I pulled two words that this gentleman had said about his deep dives on pipeline. I put those in quotes, and then I put plus Sam Sales. So he knows the first part, right? Because he was just joking about it on LinkedIn. He knows the second part because he just said it, and I put it in quotes. So he knew that it was his own quote, and he has absolutely no idea what the hell Sam Sales is, theoretically, right? Although maybe he does because we're a partner of SalesLoft. But he opened the email, and not only did he open the email, I got a response, a meeting booked in 19 minutes. This happens all day, every day, right? And sellers that use this methodology tell us it happens to them all the time. So what works on me is knowing that a seller isn't doing a scaled and veiled outreach, right? They're not sending 500 emails to people that all went to Florida State like I did and say, go Knowles, want to buy my stuff? But they're
definitely not this season. Y'all are
definitely not this year. Yeah. That would be great. Really? Go Knowles? Yeah. You not only know me, but man, you know football.
I don't even know what's going on in football.
I am delighted. I cannot wait to meet with you. You seem bright. But it's that, right? And I think on the human level, just one thing I'll note there is don't forget that when you're doing your research on these people, they're more than just someone with wallet share. They are, I know this is shocking, human beings who have lives and interests and things that they'd want to humanizedly talk to you about. Is that a word? We're going with it. But you can connect with people on more than just, here's how we can improve your bottom line.
I think that's a great start to a lot of things. When you scale and veil, if you don't have that, that should be your next thing behind you. But I think that at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest obstacle people have because they're looking to run or go too fast, that they don't take the time to slow down. So this whole entire thing we're going to talk about today from the buyer's perspective is how do you make sure that you are showing you or me, right, that you know them immediately as soon as they get into a sales call or obviously a prospecting. So let's talk about, okay, you booked that meeting, right? And now you're going to have the call with this CRO. So from the buyer perspective, what is the biggest mistakes that sellers make? Okay, so they did a good job getting the meeting, but what mistakes are they making once they're in the actual meeting? Because once you're there, that's a whole different conversation as well.
Totally. one of the things that we do at Sam Sales, we listen to discovery calls, hundreds of discovery calls, and we break them down. We work with teams, et cetera. And we hear the same thing over and over again. So the biggest mistake I can confidently tell you, it happens every single day. And it's that reps show up completely unprepared, right? So they start the conversation first in really generic ways. Hey, Morgan, where are you based? I'm in Arizona. Where are you based? Oh, good. How's the weather in Arizona? It's sunny. Thank you. How is it in wherever the hell you are? Right. So one, we show up unprepared with that information. We don't know who they are. We don't know how long they've worked there. We don't know even where they're based. Right. We've heard people say that, we don't even know how to pronounce the company name right. We don't know what the company even does. There's such a lack of understanding and preparedness.
Right.
But then I think another mistake people make, and Doug Landis and I actually go back and forth a lot on this, debating it out, but they show up with a point of view and a narrative on that call. Now, I will say that I think that's really important when you are talking to your C-suite, your top brass of an existing client, or you've been working with their teams who are finally getting you in front of the key decision makers. But the very first call that you have, when you know nothing about the teams, nothing about the initiatives other than your research, showing up with your point of view and your narrative on how you can help them, it is really misguided because we don't know anything. We haven't had a conversation with them yet, right? Imagine if you showed up to a first date and you did that. Morgan, here's how I can rock your world. You'll be like, oh, yeah, that's not even what I need, right?
So upfront contract on the first 5 minutes of the date?
Maybe we edit that part out because people are like, wow.
Here are the 5 things you're going to expect on this date. No, don't take this date. Do not take this dating. Do not take this. Do not. But yes, continue.
But think about this, right? So like, how do we show them we know them without giving our narrative, things like that? Here's what I would tell you. Master this script, right? Do your research in advance, first understanding who they are, who they know, common connections, any of that stuff, right? And I think there's a whole sheet about it that you can find on our website. We give it away for free. But when you think about that, get on and say, Morgan, first of all, thanks again for making time. Listen, I could tell you a million things about Sam Sales. 1, 2, and 3. And these are 3 headline topics that focus specifically on you as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, as a LinkedIn expert. I have to think about who you are to make sure I'm talking about the 3 things that apply to you. 1, 2, and 3. But I'd love to hear about you first. Here's what I know about AMP. Here's what I recently saw. Here's what I love about your content, etc. But tell me about you. Initiatives you're trying to solve for, things you're chasing on the new year, growth that you're trying to gather. Like, tell me about you. What's the overall landscape like, if that's okay? So here's what you should know about us. Here's what I already know about you. And then ask for permission at the end. And I'll tell you, even more importantly, use a script like that for an inbound lead. Because maybe somebody like Morgan, right, like comes to us and says like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about building my brand on LinkedIn, which Morgan needs zero help with, by the way. But he doesn't know that we do this and this. So, but buyers like him often buy this and this. So if I say those 2 extra things, Morgan will be like, oh man, I came to you for LinkedIn stuff, but I didn't even know that you guys did that. And I'm like, well, you do now. So think about those things, right? That can really set you up in a different way to show your buyer that you've done your research, you're prepared with your narrative if they want to hear it. But what we really want to hear is what's in their brain first, and crack their heads open and get that stream of consciousness out.
So we're completely cutting out the weather, things of that nature. By the way, if you ask what the weather is in Arizona, like it's pretty much the same every time. So that would make me actually just annoyed. I'd be like, yeah, it's pretty consistent.
Slight caveat for my Brits, by the way, who are listening, and they're like, what? No. So if it is part of your culture to talk about the weather, and that is a very normal thing, have at it. You probably wouldn't, I don't know, you'd talk about maybe football here if you saw the person's like, bright blue Michigan banners all over their profile.
Of course.
Think about that stuff. But otherwise, right, the weather, like be better than the weather. Be better than the Gap. Does anybody know Crazy Stupid Love? Such a good movie. Be better than the weather, right? Show your executive presence. We have so many more things to talk about than if it's partly cloudy out. Although I will say Morgan and I talked about the weather at the start of our call. So really practicing what I'm preaching.
We did. Only if you personally know them, right? But if you don't go that direction. So
don't go that direction.
I like the setup on the narrative. I'm assuming, like, not to get too technical, but someone probably could spend 5 to 8 minutes to do everything that you said. Go to the LinkedIn, go to the website, get themselves in order, and prepare for this at the beginning of the call. So tactically, every seller, you know what to do there. But I also want to talk about as well, once they've done this homework, they've laid out the narrative, right? And they're now giving information. What would impress the buyer from there? Because I think that you could go into deeper layered questions from there. You could state, okay, I've actually heard this pain point from a buyer earlier. I think there's contextual things that we could dive into that at the end of the day, obviously, that it's going to be different on each scenario. But once you hear that narrative and you hear them give that, what is the next step a seller should take to amplify the information they got? Because I think you could also use information and just like value vomit all over them and do a pitch that doesn't matter.
I want to pause and say this right here. This is the mistake that people make. So let's just say you guys just heard the question that Morgan asked me, right? And let's say if I said, Morgan, what I think I heard you say is, and then I repeated everything you just said. Is that right? And then you'd be like, yes, because I just asked you that exact question. This is what a lot of sellers do, right? They think that repeating back or mirroring whatever they just heard is really important. And I couldn't disagree more. I think what's important is you ingest that information, whatever you just heard, and then you say something like, if I've been a million questions for you, can I start at the first point you mentioned, or whatever point of the 3 or 4 and 9 that they listed for you are challenges or goals that are most vital to you. So you go to that, and then you start to kind of work through a schematic. Ask for more information there first and foremost. This was so great. Tell me a little bit more about this challenge. Could you? Okay, they're going to tell you a little more. Ask an active listening question on there. So don't just move on to qualifying, spin selling questions. Don't do any of that. Just ask questions. Get an understanding of what it is that they're working on. The other thing I want you to think about, and this is kind of where the art of sales comes into play, your EQ, your personality, your own charisma or lack thereof. But really important.
What if you don't have charisma, Sam? What if I'm not funny, I don't have charisma, and I can't talk?
Morgan, it's fine. You're not funny, and you've been really successful. You're in good shape. I think, weaving these things in it takes a skill set, but
of course,
you want to be careful that you balance your question asking with some storytelling. So if I just keep peppering you with questions, at some point, especially the more senior the buyer is, they're going to say, can you help us or not? So it's really important that you ask a question for more information, ask an active listening question, and then give them some kind of validation that you either hear this every day, it's a challenge you solve, something, a theory that you have around that. Yes, I hear this every single day. And one of the things that's frustrating is that people do this because of this, and that leads to that. Then the buyer goes like, yes, that's exactly it. Now we've told a story, we've shared an opinion, narrative, whatever, that's allowed us to earn the right to continue asking questions, right? I have more that I can tell you about that. Can I actually just shift to your second point? What I like to do on discovery calls, right, is I like to ask a little bit about point 1, share how we can help, and then I like to tear the rug out from under them and move on to point 2. I want to get them to be like, that's exactly what we need. Yes, you get it, as many times as I possibly can on the phone. Because I'll tell you, if I can kind of do that roller coaster, right, I'm climbing up and asking the questions, and then I'm like, we can help you. They're like, that's amazing. And then I'm boring and I go back to the next question. See my hands there. It's a real roller coaster.
The Sam roller.
The Sam roller. They're going to be so excited by the end of it.
McKenna Mayhem roller coaster. I mean, look, you can have your own roller coaster as well.
I like all the names are coming up for. I think the
names.
I don't know what the hell I was even going to say now. I think the idea, right, is
you were talking about the roller coaster of emotions,
roller coaster of love.
You asked the question, and then the second point. That's where you were going. That's where you're going with.
I want them to be so excited at the end of that call, right? Because we've gotten them to go like, that's exactly what we need so many times that when you do that with a buyer, you don't even need to map out next steps. You don't need to ask what comes next, right? And I think that's what the coolest thing about all of this is that the buyer will ultimately go and say, this is great. It's exactly what we need. Perfect. Here's what we want to do next. And you're like, tell me, while you're literally painting your nails on the other side of the call, not having to do anything because they're going to tell you exactly the direction. I think the other thing to keep in mind with this, right, is that you're earning that trust and you're earning access to power from there. So sometimes we continue to be single-threaded instead of multi-threaded because we haven't done enough of a good job on the call. So then the person wants to maybe validate us on the second call. So now, instead of talking to Morgan and team, I'm going to talk to Morgan again, which is lovely. But you also don't want to make the mistake of thinking that just because I have the CEO on the call, CRO, CMO, et cetera, that I don't need to multi-thread. Because Morgan, like me, owns a small business, has a small team, doesn't make decisions in a vacuum. And I'll tell you, people that are in corporate buying cycles, they also don't make decisions in a vacuum. They're relying on their team, their experts, their influencers, et cetera, to make decisions. So the faster we can gain access to that power and their team around them and scale our time, the better.
So second to last question here. The shift obviously during COVID was a lot of virtual meetings. We're still in these virtual meetings, Zoom fatigue, things of that nature. Is everything you're saying, does that change when you meet with people in person? And what are some in-person things you do from a meeting standpoint? Does that change in any way? Because right now we're in event season, right? As we're recording this, there are people who are going in event season. Does anything you said change in person, or does it stay the same?
I think it's interesting. So I think one, kind of think back to how often we would go and do these discovery calls and things like that in person with zero qualification whatsoever. So the only thing that I would say that's kind of different in that is make sure that these in-person visits are worth your time. Nothing else to me changes for the in-person versus the digital. We're still doing our research. We're coming prepared. In fact, just imagine if you walked into a conference room and you were like, so where are you based? Like, we wouldn't ask those questions in person, right? We would know that stuff. We'd be a little bit more prepared. Treat it the same way. I will say, like, for anyone that's listening from a leadership perspective, consider this too, that you probably have tons of reps and SDRs on your teams that have never been to conferences, have never managed a booth, have never gone in person to meetings, they don't even know what to do, to show up to a conference correctly. They might not even know, right, to pull a Sam sales trick, which is to go to those meetings an hour early and work in the Starbucks in the lobby, just to make sure you're on time, which is my biggest panic, is punctuality, because I promise you're not getting that time back if you miss your window. But nothing else is different there. The only other thing I would say is, like, as you go in person, think about things that you can do that are a little different. So if we're going in the morning, we're always bringing some kind of like breakfast good with us. If we're going in the afternoon, we're also bringing sugar. And then we're, making some lighthearted jokes about having to listen to us talk about sales training at 4:00 in the afternoon, like everybody can't wait to do. But think about those things. And then again, like, this is like kind of an old school thing with in person, but don't forget to engage with the person that's walking you to the conference room, that person that greeted you in the lobby, right? Like, again, those people are sometimes your gatekeepers and your stakeholders. And it's like, you want to see how people treat them. And a lot of people just don't think to engage with that person. So make an effort.
Last question for you, Sam, as we get out of here. We've talked all about the things from a buyer's perspective on talking to multiple buyers, storytelling, how to make sure to set up the call the right way so everyone is prepared. What would be the most useful advice you could give to sellers talking to buyers that typically most people miss out on? Like an underrated tip that you wish they would listen to you on this and they just don't.
I don't know if it's underrated, but I think it's not practice. So I would tell you, back to the example of reaching out to the CRO at SalesOpt, right? Most people are terrified to do that. They don't want to reach out to the scary C-suite. Instead, they want to reach out to the, VP or senior director. Go big, right? The easiest thing that you can do to scale your time, make sure you be effective, tier out your people, is go a skip level or two above who you normally talk to. Change your narrative, right? So if I'm coming and I'm talking about demand gen technology or something like that, and I'm going to the CMO, I'm not going to talk about the nitty gritty of our platform. I'm going to talk about how our technology can impact the goals he or she cares about. So do that effort on the show me, you know me, not on the level that you're accustomed to reaching out to, but hold your breath, go 2 levels above, do your research on them. And guess what? The higher you go, the easier it is to find stuff about them, because they're probably on podcasts, on boards, on webinars, have a complete LinkedIn profile. Go up. It's not so scary. And then they'll probably respond because no one else is making an effort. No. And they'll kick you down to the person that reports to them. So you're still 1 level above. And spoiler alert, you've now multi-threaded just like that. Right? You've now got the CMO and the SVP of demand gen that you're talking to in just one full swoop.
Easy enough. Well, Sam, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks everyone for tuning into this episode. Make sure to take this advice that we gave you today and use it in your meetings. You can impress your buyers, and we'll see you on the next episode.